So we got a question this morning, and I was wondering if you could answer it again. And the question is, what is the difference between chanda and tanha? Chanda being desire, tanha being craving.
Yeah, so the difference is that chanda, as a desire, as a form of zeal, interest, can be either wholesome or unwholesome. So if you have a desire towards sensuality, that is kama chanda, that's chanda raga. That is not a wholesome desire. But then if you want to be free from sensuality, say you started and you began to understand the dissatisfaction of it and so on, then you can actually have a desire to be free from it, to be free from sensuality and sensual desire. So it's still a form of desire that can now make you actually want to practice the Dhamma and sense restraint and so on. So that's also a desire, but it's a desire that can actually eventually result in freedom from desire, freedom from sensual desire, freedom from the desire for pleasures and so on. So chanda is not in itself bad, no good. It's really it depends where you direct it. So that's why those types of striving that the Buddha describes in the suttas, that's all based on desire for abandoning the unwholesome states and desire for increasing the wholesome states. So it's not a question of not having desires when you begin to practice. It's really about having the desires that are directed at development of wholesomeness and skillfulness, that will then result in diminishing of unwholesome desires and everything else. And then when you're completely free from any desire towards sensuality and so on, you will also lose the desire towards wholesomeness, because that is now what you are. So you don't need to have a desire to develop wholesomeness once you develop the wholesomeness. So that's how desire, directed rightly, can result in freedom from desire altogether, freedom from chanda altogether.
So you could say that the Arahant, the one fully accomplished, the Buddha, has no desire.
Yeah, he's free from chanda completely. Yeah, exactly. Abandoning desire is not a matter of choice. Abandoning of desire, it's a matter of directing desire towards the behavior of a certain kind, i.e. gradual training, that will then remove any basis for perpetuation of desire later on. So in other words, you become aware of your illness, you need to have a desire to be cured, because that desire will make you look for a doctor, find the right medicine, and then sustain the application of the medicine on the basis of desire for health. And then once you're cured and healed, and there is absolutely not even like the slightest traces of your illness, you will have no more desire left to be cured, because you're cured. But if while you're ill, you think that, okay, so being free from illness means no desire, thus I will have no desire, that just will prevent you from actually curing yourself. So you want to direct the desire rightly, on account of which you will start making the right effort. A person cannot distinguish in the beginning desire. What is this desire? What is that? Oh, this desire is bad, desire is bad. So that's why you need to start with a sense restraint, as we always say. But you don't want to be trying to not have desires. You want to be trying to see where your desires are directed at. And if it's a desire for physical pleasures, of the lustful kind, where we spoke before, the one that incites the lust and overwhelms the mind and makes you get out of the chair, as we gave that simile, that's the desire you should not cultivate. That's the desire you should abandon, not welcome, not entertain, endure until it passes without acting out of. So the question of, say, for example, Anagami, who is free from sensual desire, he's not free from chanda. He's free from chanda towards the sense objects of pleasures and so on. So in other words, freedom from sensuality doesn't mean absence of chanda of any kind. It means loss of interest, loss of zeal for the sensual type of pleasure. Why? Well, because the gratification has been fully understood, the danger has been fully understood, and the escape has been fully understood. So it's not that anagami or an arahant have no concept anymore of what physical pleasure would feel like. It's they have no interest in it anymore on the level of their mind and intent and thought. So they're absolutely free from any zeal that person not free from sensuality would otherwise have. And you could see that you would have a person who have a sensual thought, and there is immediate, like, quite a strong, depending on how much mind development you have sort of engaged with, but there will be an inclination towards it. There will be like this welcoming of that prospect, even if you practice sense restraint. So that's why you're not free from sensuality, because of that mental delight, chanda, desire, zeal, whatever you want to translate it. And that can only be abandoned through seeing the danger of that which you're delighting towards, because if you're, you will not have an interest anymore in ingesting poison if you understood the deadliness of the poison. So the texture of it hasn't changed. The physical contact, pleasure of a pleasurable kind, hasn't changed. But your understanding now of seeing it as a poison, that has changed. So you have absolutely no zeal towards that kind of pleasure whatsoever. You have no interest in it.
That's, a lot of people can say, well, I understand that sensuality is bad. I understand that. I get that. It. I've reflected on the dangers, yet I'm still attracted.
Yeah.
To things.
So the Buddha said that for as long as you haven't fully understood the gratification, fully understood the danger, and fully understood the escape, you should not claim that you understood sensuality. Because if you do, means you're contradicting yourself. Because if you fully did understand these three aspects, there will be no chanda towards sensuality left. There will be chanda towards renunciation, towards seclusion, towards further abandonment. And that chanda's fine, because it will make you make more of the effort. So yes, a person will inevitably think, yeah, I understand the peril of sensuality. Okay, fine. Ask yourself then the next question. So am I free from any form of delight, welcoming, zeal, interest, curiosity even, towards pleasures that come on account of object of the senses that are inducive of lust and so on? No, I don't think I'm free of that, or I'm not sure if I'm free of that. Means you're not free of that, means don't think you understood it. It means make more effort. Nobody denies that you will have some insight or some degree of insight into sensuality once you start restraining and looking, but don't think that's the freedom up until you know, oh, I am free, I don't want this, this is truly something I have no interest in anymore. Quite the opposite. Like, you might spend most of the time of your day not having interest, but are you still liable to have interest towards sensuality? If so, you are not outside of the domain of that kama bhava and kama chanda. So you always want to look on that level of liability. Oh, but am I liable to become careless and interested in this again? Maybe. Well, there you go. Not free from doubt in regard to it, not free from it. So you want to really abandon that zeal towards the objects of your senses. And that's freedom from kama chanda. So as for Tanha, if it comes down to Tanha now, it's subtler. Tanha is sort of on a different level. So chanda is kind of an active thing that you either carelessly engage with on account of your past behavior that hasn't been restrained, or something you can cultivate, as we would say, he generates the desire. So you reflect why it's good to be cured, why it's good to make the effort, why it's good to practice gradual training, why it's good to be virtuous in sense restraint. And because of those values you reflect upon, you will generate a desire to do it. Tanha, it's more on an immediate level of basically your attitude towards your presently enduring feeling, whatever that is. And that attitude is always rooted in resistance. So if there is like tanha for pleasure, craving for pleasure, that is rooted in you resisting the current feeling, which is not necessarily unpleasant, but it's not sufficient. So the pleasure it's not sufficient, which is why you crave for more pleasure, which means, in other words, it's painful. Any resistance is unpleasant. So if you resist, with the mind of resistance, if you experience pleasure, you will by default resist it, because by default you want more of it, by default. With the mind not free from tanha, you experience pain, by default you're resisting it, because you don't want any of it. You want it completely to go away. So with the mind not free from tanha, you experience a neutral feeling, same. You will automatically resist it towards oblivion, towards ignorance, towards turning away from it, because you don't understand it. So tanha, practically speaking, is always that resistance on the level of what you're currently feeling.
Even if you're feeling pleasure, you're still resisting.
Absolutely,
that.
absolutely.
So,
That's why if you're not free from tanha, every pleasure will be underlined by craving for more.
And dukkha.
And exactly. And so, as I said, presence of resistance means dukkha. And I said that before. Presence of tanha means dukkha. Dukkha means tanha
No
is
matter
there.
the extent of the pleasure that you can actually get.
No. So if there is still tanha there, means there is still resistance to whatever's there for you at the time. And that's why you suffer. Not because of what's there for you at the time. And why would you be resisting? So why is it that you're not contented with, some like agreeable feeling that is present? Why is it that by default the mind wants more of it? It's because of the holding of the view in regard to what pleasure is, what sensuality is, what gratification is, where the value is. And that's why sensuality is a form of upadana. It's a form of assumption. It's a form of a view. It's not a physical experience of pleasure or not. It's basically the value that you have mentally, that you uphold through basically, throughout your day-to-day existence.
So the assumption is that pleasure is.
Well, the assumption is that there is no there's no first point where you were not attracted to sensuality and then you began. You start by already being attracted, which means the assumption is that the pleasure is over there. And the reason that assumption exists is because you haven't removed it. That's the sole reason. That's why you have to contemplate the danger of your view that pleasure is there, not gratifying it, not welcoming it, not delighting in it. And then the danger of where you think pleasure is will become apparent, and then you would have lost the assumption of where the pleasure is. And then you will have stopped resisting whatever you're feeling currently. Certainly on account of pleasant feeling. You wouldn't be craving for more pleasure, because the only reason you crave for more pleasure is because you keep assuming pleasure to be out there. And that is always underlined by craving for more.
Unsatisfactory.
Exactly. And same then you will stop resisting by removing that resistance towards insufficiency of pleasure, so to speak, which is your view. It's never quite enough. You will also stop resisting the disagreeability of it, which means disagreeability of anything else. You will not resist it as much, let's say it like that. So when unpleasant feeling is manifested, you will not by default trying to get rid of it. So that's what tanha is. It's that resistance to what's being felt. Sensual pleasure is felt unpleasantly. That's why you want to, seek the outcome. That's why you want to gratify your senses, because non-gratified senses hurt. So you resist the pain. Or your resistance is the pain. Because if you stop resisting the non-gratified senses, they'll stop hurting. But you don't see that the pain is on your resistance level. You think the pain is because there is no gratification of the senses, so I better go out and seek the gratification. And that's why you keep perpetuating that mistake that you yourself are living. So first you need to stop seeking out the gratification of the senses, so that your resistance to the non-gratifying senses becomes apparent as the cause of pain. And then you realize, oh, I stop resisting, it stops hurting. Gratifying senses becomes redundant. The only reason you were gratifying it is because it was hurting beforehand. And you were mistakenly thinking the lack of gratification is what was hurting, so seeking gratification will remove the pain. No, resistance of non-gratified senses, that's what's hurting. That's the patiga we spoke about, the natural patiga of your senses that you were resisting.
Your habits of resistance.
Well, yeah, the view of resistance. Then habit perpetuates the view, but the habit's there because of the view. You still think the pain that you're experiencing is because of that, not because of your resistance to pretty much to the pain you're experiencing.
That's what that view is important to.
That's why without the right view,
Make it
yeah,
right.
You
It's
won't,
this craving, that's the problem.
yeah, and that's why like craving, that resistance results in upadana, and upadana feeds that resistance. So tanha feeds upadana, the view of upadana is why tanha is there. That's why it's beginningless. It's a vicious circle. There has no beginning. It's not you were pure, then you develop tanha, then you develop upadana. No. You start already infected, perverted, mistaken, confused, assumed. Corruption is beginningless, but that's why if you understand it, if you uproot it, it's irreversible. So once you remove that gratuitous assumption and that's been feeding the craving, and craving that's been feeding the assumption, once you fully uproot that, it cannot take place again, because it was never supposed to be there to begin with. It was just a vicious circle perpetuating itself.